In today's video, we're talking about everything you need to know when it comes to buying used photography gear. So I'm no stranger to buying used photography gear. You know, I bought used camera lenses, used camera bodies, and everything in between. Even the setup that I'm using to film this video right now, most of the stuff I got used. So in this video, I'm going to share with you my personal experience when it comes to buying used photography gear. Specifically, we're going to talk about three things. First of all, we're going to talk about where to buy used photography gear. Second of all, what gear is worth buying used and what gear you maybe should just get new. And lastly, I'll share with you some tips when it comes to inspecting camera bodies and camera lenses when buying them pre-owned so that you don't buy something that's malfunctioning or maybe even broken. So make sure you stick around until the end of the video to get the most out of it. Also, if you do enjoy this kind of stuff, a like to this video would be awesome, and maybe even subscribe to the channel. Alright, so with all of this said, let's start off with where to buy used photography gear. And there's a couple of options. But before we talk about where to buy used stuff, there's something you need to consider. So if you're somebody who's real sketchy on buying used camera equipment, perhaps you should look into buying refurbished camera stuff. Now this is a good option if you're really sketchy on buying used gear, just because in most cases you're going to still have the warranty for the stuff that you're buying, and you're going to get a little bit of a discount. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. And one of the best places to look for refurbished stuff is Amazon.com. But that's not the main thing that we're talking about. To save the most money, most likely you'll have to buy used. So the first place you can look for used stuff is eBay. Now eBay is a great place when it comes to buying used things. You know, you have seller ratings, you have the buyer's protection program, but personally, I've never bought anything used from eBay. And that's because if I'm buying a used camera body for like $1,000, I want to see it firsthand and inspect it. Like, as I said, yes, you have the buyer's protection program, and if somebody sends you an item that does not match its description or is broken, eBay itself will refund you. But in my opinion, that can be a lot of hassle. You know, first of all, you need to prove that the item is not as described or broken. You have to wait for the item to get to you when you buy it. You have to send it back, ship it back, and then you have to wait for your refund on the item. And this whole process can take days and even weeks. So if I'm buying something expensive used, I don't personally like to buy from websites without seeing the items. Also, something to keep in mind is that on eBay you can get new stuff for cheaper, which is usually gray market stuff. So essentially you can buy like a new lens or a new camera body a couple of $100s cheaper, but you're not going to have any warranty on them. Some advertisers say that they have warranty on those things, but I would highly doubt that. So second of all, my preferred option is buying used photography gears from websites such as Craigslist, so pretty much just buying stuff locally. Now it's a bit tricky now with the whole COVID situation and everything, so you know, if you do plan to buy something in person, just make sure you're using all of the precautions when it comes to interacting with another person. And the third option, which I really enjoy as well, is buying stuff on Facebook. So Facebook Marketplace is a good starting point, and Facebook groups. So in a lot of areas there's like a local community of photographers, and in many situations they have a Facebook group where you can buy and sell things as well. The best deals I've got were from Facebook. Alright, the second topic is what gear is worth buying used. So here's the thing, and here's something that everybody who's getting into photography should know. It makes a lot of sense now, but when I started I didn't really think about those things like that. But is that your camera body usually, in most situations, will retain less value than your lens. So a camera lens is a lot better investment than a camera body. Let's take this 10 to 22mm Canon lens as an example. I got it used for about $250 6 years ago. I've seen these things pop up for about the same price now on Facebook, so if I wanted to, I could sell it back for roughly the same price. If you buy a camera body after 5 years, it's going to be outdated and is going to lose a lot more value than a lens. You know, a lens can still be outdated, but these things, lenses, tend to retain a lot more value. Also, when talking about camera bodies, you need to keep in mind what kind of camera body you're buying. So for example, the flagship cameras like the Sony a7 III or the Canon 1DX Mark II, those things will retain a lot of value because those are highly sought after cameras, and second of all, it's just supply and demand. You know, there's going to be less people buying really expensive pro-end cameras, so there's going to be less supply on the second-hand market. But something like a mid-tier or entry-level level camera body, such as like the Canon 80D, a lot more people are going to buy it. So when it comes to selling it off, there's going to be a lot more supply. But in many situations, you can buy used camera bodies really cheaply. Just make sure that in this situation, like with the Sony a7 III, its newer model, Sony a7 IV, is rumored to be just around the corner. So this might not be the best time to buy a used Sony a7 III, just because when the new camera drops, there's going to be a lot of a7 IIIs on the market, and it's just going to drive their value down. So that's something you also need to keep in mind. Just look for revisions for camera bodies or lenses so that you don't buy something in the wrong time. Okay, so lastly, you finally made your decisions on what lens to buy used or what camera body to buy used. So let's talk about how to inspect these things so you can be sure that everything is working properly and it's not going to die on you within the first couple of days. So let's start off with the camera bodies. First thing, just come prepared. Be prepared to test out the camera body. So that means bring a microphone with you so that you can test out if the microphone jack works. If you have any USB cables that you can plug in to test out different ports, bring those as well. Bring a cable so that you can plug in the camera to your computer. Of course, if the owner is okay with you plugging his camera into the computer, just to check that all of the ports work. Second of all, just do a visual inspection of the camera. So what you're looking for are, some rough scuffs that could indicate that the camera has been dropped. Also, what I like to do is just ask for the camera's repair history. And if you want to go a step further, what you can do is you can grab the camera's serial number and call up the local supplier and just ask if the camera has ever been in for repairs. So this is going to only work if the camera has been to, its original manufacturer's repair shop. If the guy used some third-party repair shop to repair his camera, it's not going to show up. But it's still something good that you can do just, to double check. Make sure to ask for the shutter count. So shutter count is pretty much like mileage on a car. So each camera has a shutter count expectancy. It depends from camera to camera, so you can just look it up on Google, what's the shutter count expectancy for the specific camera you're buying. But honestly, in a lot of situations, it's not really that helpful. For example, for the Sony a7 III, the shutter expectancy is between 250,000 shots to about 500,000 shots. So that's a huge variation where we can fall in before the shutter actually dies. So 10, 20, 30,000 shots, that's not a lot. Professional photographers can go over 50, 60, 70, maybe even 100,000 shots in a year. Now, if you don't know the shutter count of the camera, there are websites where you can just drop in a photo taken by the camera and it's going to tell you what is the approximate shutter count. So I will leave those links down in the description so you can use those websites when you're buying your next camera body. Next up, what you want to do with your camera body is pop on a lens, close up the aperture and just shoot against the sky, preferably during daylight. Well, actually only during daylight. And what you're looking for are dots on the images. So usually these dots can be just particles of dust on the sensor that can be cleaned off. And lastly, just press all of the buttons on the camera and make sure that all of the buttons feel kind of similar. So what I know is that if somebody has repaired the camera and they haven't done a good job, for example, just replacing buttons because of water damage, if they didn't do a good job, usually the buttons will stick or just feel a little bit off. So click every single button and make sure it's clicky, it feels like the rest of the buttons, and just it doesn't feel off. And if everything is alright, so even if the camera has been repaired, it means that they did a good job. Another thing with the camera bodies is that listen for the shutter if it sounds alright. Usually, you can't really tell by the sound, but a sign that the shutter might be dying is that try to take different photos at different shutter speeds, especially fast or slower shutter speeds, and what you're looking for on the image are streaks, vertical or horizontal streaks of kind of darker areas on your photos. So I know with the Sony a7 III, when the shutter is, about to die, it starts to malfunction just a little bit, and you can see kind of these darker streaks on your images. It starts out really subtle, but if you catch that early, you can prepare for what's coming. Alright, so when it comes to used lenses, so the first thing you're going to do is the same thing, just do a visual inspection and you're looking for cracks, scuffs, anything that can indicate that the lens has been, dropped. Make sure you look at the front glass element and also at the back, and you're looking for cracks as well. And what else you want to do is you want to look through the lens, usually from the back, but also from the front, and look for dust particles inside of the lens. Usually those things can be cleaned out pretty easily, but you don't really want dust in between your glass elements inside of the lens. In rare cases, if the lens has been sitting for a really long time, fungus can develop inside of the lens, but these are extreme situations and it happens really rarely. Once that is done, pop the lens onto your camera and just play around with the lens. If it's a zoom lens, try different focal lengths and take photos. Try different apertures and take photos. Next up, do the same thing, close up the aperture, shoot against the sky, and look for some dots on your photos. That can also indicate dust inside of the lens, but keep in mind it can also indicate that your sensor is just dirty as well. So if you have two cameras that you can test the lens on, just to make sure that it isn't the lens, do that. Make sure to check out the autofocus and listen to the autofocusing motors. What I like to do is watch a video before buying the used lens and just take a listen to the autofocusing motors in the video and then kind of compare if it sounds roughly the same in real life. Autofocusing motors make noise and that's alright. Just listen for like real crackling, or if the motors feel tired and it's just real slow and it feels like the lens is really struggling to focus, that might indicate that the focusing motor is actually, dying. If the lens has image stabilization, turn that on, check it out as well. Lens stabilization will make some noise as well, but the same thing, I like to watch a video, take a listen from the video, from the review, how it sounds like, and then compare it to real life. And lastly, if the lens has any different buttons, just try every single button, see if it works, if it's nice and clicky, and you're good to go. Alright, so that's pretty much it. After all of this, you should know how to properly inspect a camera body, you should know how to properly inspect a lens, and if you follow all of the things I told you, you're all good to go and go out and get good deals on used photography gear. Alright, that's it from me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave down in the comments your tips for buying used photography gear, or just let me know what are your best deals when it comes to buying used stuff, filmmaking, photography, whatever. I would just love to know. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys in the next video.